Chapter 27. The Lady in the Garden. And then we were officially free and on winter holidays. It was fine at first, but being home for holidays was so different without Annika or Pop around, and after one day on our own, our excitement turned to mush. "Maybe she'll say she can come home today," Sam said, when we just passed Blairgowrie on the bus. "Yeah, maybe," I mumbled. But I didn't really think so. We got to the hospital and headed to Annika's room. This time as we walked past the hospital atrium, the glass-walled courtyard garden for patients and visitors, I looked in to see who might be sitting on the wooden benches and enjoying the garden. It was just one lady that I could see, sitting there in a loose white hospital gown. She was looking off at one of the far corridors behind the glass, while making gentle circles over her belly that wasn't nearly as big as Annika's, but still very round. She had long black hair and a plait that was thrown over her shoulder, and I didn't know why, but I thought she looked so sad sitting there, still as a statue, except for her hands making those circles. "Mum!" Sam's voice snapped me back, and when I looked I saw that he was running towards Annika. She was walking slowly, hanging onto a metal pole that was wheeling beside her and connected by a tube. He skidded to a stop in front of her, and then she reached her hand to ruffle his hair, but he didn't dare touch her. She looked worse than she had during our first few visits, all swollen and sore, wincing as she turned to head back to her room. Maybe because walking around was tiring her out, but I could tell Sam was disturbed to see how sick Annika looked, how fragile. When we got there, Annika sat on the bed, slowly wriggled back, and then heaved her legs up after her. She was out of breath, and I handed her a plastic cup from the bedside table. She drank quickly and then seemed to breathe a little easier.
"Thank you, my dears,"
she said, and smiled at both of us. Then she focused on Sam.
"Luca tells me you refused to talk to your dad again last night."
"Don't have to if I don't want to," he said, but I think he regretted the words when he saw the look Annika gave him.
"Fred, honey, would you mind giving me and Sam a minute alone?"
"Sure, I'll just..." But Annika was already snapping at Sam to sit down. So I dropped my backpack by the bed and hurried out. I only stayed in the corridor for a second before I decided it was too busy and wandered back towards the atrium. I pulled the heavy sliding door open and stepped inside, breathing in the smell of earth and green. Some kid sitting on a patch of grass started bubbling with laughter while a couple watched from one of the benches that were placed all around the courtyard's perimeter. The lady with the long black plait was still there too, only now she was hugging her belly, the same way Annika did, like she had to hold on. I wandered over to the last empty bench and spaced out for a bit, watching the kid on the grass play until his parents said it was time to go. I realised that Dad was wearing a dressing gown and he looked so sad as they gathered the kid up and walked out. Then the place was quiet, with just the lady and me, and in the quiet I thought about my mum. I wondered if this garden had been here when she had me, and if she sat around rubbing her belly the way Annika and that lady did, or brought me here all bundled up. I wondered if she started calling me Winnie from the first day, and what she'd think of me now. Nadim! My head snapped up and my eyes were instantly drawn to the woman, no longer as still as a statue, but wobbling to her feet and clutching her belly with one hand, while holding the other to her back. Nadim! Her face crumpled in pain, and I made a quick decision to run straight to the glass wall and bang on it for help. A nurse and a doctor came sprinting down the corridor while I waved urgently and pointed to the woman behind me. I turned around and went back to her, but I didn't know what to do. She grabbed my upper arm to steady herself, wincing again from pain. "Nadim," she said, and then a whole lot of words spilled out that I didn't understand. Meredita, I whispered, the only word I knew, and the woman kept staring at me, still gritting her teeth, and with her eyes watering, but for a second I thought she looked relieved and a little less scared. "Coming through," the nurse called, and she was followed by a doctor pushing an empty wheelchair, and I moved out of the way as they helped lower her into the chair. I hurried behind them as they pushed her towards the doors, and I listened to the woman keep talking in that language. I didn't know. The doctor and nurse didn't know it either, but it must have been Albanian. "Can we get a translator back here?" the doctor asked. And then they were out the door and rushing down the corridor. I stood there, just staring down the corridor. "Fred!" I looked over and there was Sam, standing with his backpack on, holding mine in front of him while pushing his glasses up again. "The nurse has said the visits are over." I nodded and walked to him, took my backpack and had one last look down the corridor, where the woman had been wheeled away. "You look weird," Sam said. "I'm fine," I snapped. "Let's go."